Salutations, and welcome to what I'd like to refer to as the Earth episode. I have decided that this is my year to take on the war on science that's going on, to try and help win it, to do my part. And as part of that, I've decided to shift focus somewhat to the Earth, to climate change, and to all these horrible things that are going on, but not so much them as the things that will go on if we don't make a change.
Hey, Spence, can you give me my coat? Yes, please. Hey,
So, we will go to space at the end of each show. Would it surprise you to know that transportation accounts for America's biggest CO2 source? How about that in such an environment, the EPA is getting rid of, sunsetting, it's getting tough on the emissions from California and CO2 climate change in general. The last 40 years, our biggest source of greenhouse gas pollution was the billowing smokestacks and menacing power stations, trains, planes, automobiles, and they all overtook that source to be the new hands-down winner. In 1967, the Federal Air Quality Act was enacted. Now, this gave California the ability to set its own stringent air quality rules because of its unique geography, weather, expanding number of people and vehicles and such. It needed to have a hold on it. So, the federal government has historically set fuel economy standard for vehicles, known as CAFE standards. However, when the Clean Air Act of 1970 was passed, the state of California already had stricter emission standards in place than the federal law. To avoid preempting California standards, the federal law allowed California to apply for a waiver, and that would be granted as long as California's standard was at least as strict as the federal one. It also allowed other states to choose whether to follow California's or the federal government. So, move ahead several years, and the coalition of states and cities have continued the Paris Accord. Now, they're acting responsibly regarding our future generations, but now it's in peril. Part of it involves the power of that waiver. This waiver was previously challenged in court by George W. Bush and his administration after California imposed regulations on vehicle CO2 emissions, but that case was dropped after the 2008 election. Now the Trump administration, as EPA head Scott Pruitt, also appear to be mounting a similar challenge. It's unclear if California waiver will survive. To date, 17 states have adopted California's emission standards. But all that is in jeopardy with this challenge. While 70 to 80% of the emission reduction is done at the state and local level, regardless of federal policy, if they should win their challenge against California, it may be impossible for the alliance to meet the goals. So, manufacturers of passenger vehicles have customarily made the models meet the stricter California standards, and thus, not making two different sets of cars. So it kind of has a different effect. It helps out everybody. It helps overall. But it's been predicted that by 2040, 90% of all cars in the U.S. will be electric. But American consumers don't seem to agree. Electric recharge stations are considered too distantly placed by many drivers as compared with the low cost of gas, low enough. Americans as a whole aren't as concerned about climate change as their European cousins. I definitely will keep following this story as I am also meeting with some of these forces involved in making these decisions. I'm in the process of doing a documentary on climate change, basically called Naive, and it's probably transitioning because this is a new process that's coming up. This is a new thing that the government's trying to shut down the California standards. So now I'm going to have to change a little bit my documentary. In NASA news, NASA's moving forward, on Boeing's design, to a lunar orbital platform gateway. It is a sparingly crewed cislunar space station. ESA, NSA, Roscosmos, JAXA, CSA, and it would be constructed in the 2020s. Roscosmos may go another direction. Russia's space agency began working on a contingency plan that would reshape its future in space exploration, with the country shifting its human spaceflight cooperation from the United States to China. The station will be used as a staging place for the proposed deep space transport, which is a concept of a reusable vehicle that uses electric and chemical propulsion, and would be specifically designed for crewed missions to destinations such as Mars, but more recently is being looked at for its capabilities for assisting in travel to the moon and observation of the Earth. Now, if funded, the Gateway will be developed, serviced, and utilized in collaboration with commercial and international partners for use as a staging ground for robotic and crewed lunar service. Used for science, the Trump administration, keenly interested in the commercial sector, would be enabled by a suite of instruments housed on or inside the structure itself. Or scientists could then make the Earth and solar observations they needed to without having astronauts up in that particular location. It may sound like I'm suggesting the ISS 2.0. Well, no. The Gateway would not be constantly tended by astronauts, except maybe once a year where they do the checks and make sure everything's going perfectly. But those observations could be maintained via instruments and cameras that pointed toward the Earth, where the data is received at some laboratory here. Russia, while considering partnerships elsewhere, is currently under economic strains that may restrict their plan to a new space station in Earth's orbit, or a lunar base directly on the moon. They have major plans for the rest of their spaceflight program, but that should tie up their funds for now. Anyway, enough of that. This Gateway offers us exciting chances. For instance, its unique orbit in the cislunar spot, known as L1, it might be put into L2. That means we would have the needed vantage point to permit astronaut operation of telerobots on the lunar surface. Cool, right? This would no longer solely be an Earth observatory, but a solar system. It would be able to look out at the galaxy, at the universe. There are, of course, detractors from constantly changing and updating plan. Robert Zurban, president of the Colorado-based Pioneer Astronautics, as well as founder and president of the Public Advocacy Group and the Mars Society, doesn't feel that the Gateway is necessary. He doesn't see a need to monitor the Earth or to worry about the lunar surface. The fact that we could launch deeper into space one day from a lunar launch site, much cheaper, or make new finds on the far side, or perhaps be able to see incoming meteors once obstructed by the sun, all make this an exciting proposition. It is the one project I am excited about from this current administration. Yes, I do see it can accomplish a lot more than 45 has suggested, but I do see that as being something that can change over time, whereas construction and it taking the plunge is the first step. Now, my new format gives more importance to some of my old format. If one were to consider the goings-on here on Earth and realize that one day, all too soon, space may be literally our last frontier, our new home, our only hope, then one day might see this as an ongoing story as all important. I am speaking, of course, about Elon Musk. The new study that he has published about plans to colonize Mars, published this month in the journal New Space. You'll find a link to it, by the way, on my website. The paper describes SpaceX's current plans for starting a Mars colony, starting with a big, fully reusable BFR, big rocket. A BFR ship overview. The ship is 48 meters long. Dry mass is expected to be nearly 85 tons. The ship will approximately 1,100 tons of propellant with an ascent design of 150 tons and return a mass of 50 tons. Basically, it is as if Falcon 9 upper stage and Dragon were combined. The engine section is in the rear, the propellant tanks in the middle, and then a large payload bay in the front, so pretty much standard design. Although the payload bay is 8 stories tall. To put in perspective, you could fit a whole stack of Falcon 1 rockets in the payload bay. Now, there is a small delta wing at the back of the rocket, and the reason for that is to expand the mission envelope of the BFR spaceship. It gives it more ability to do everything or anything without requiring redesign. Depending on if you are landing, maybe entering a planet or a moon with no atmosphere, a thin atmosphere, or a dense atmosphere, or no payload in the front, a small payload, heavy payload, any variation. The rocket has to be balanced out as it is coming in. The delta wing at the back, which also includes a split for pitch and control, allows this. It enables it to land anywhere in the solar system. Musk has said that SpaceX plans to test launch the first spaceship on short up and down flights before the summer of 2019. It'll probably happen at SpaceX's remote facility in McGregor, Texas. In other news, around the same time as SpaceX begins to reach for Mars, they may also start using their BFRs to establish a high-speed transport for Earth. Theoretically, a BFR flight from Los Angeles to New York would take 25 minutes. Sure, the rocket rides might be a bit costly and maybe a tad uncomfortable for passengers. Never count out a civilian's desire to travel fast. I won't review all of it with you. As I said, there's a link to it on my site, www.marylouisedavy.com. But I'll review the Mars mission goals and the concept of the base. Mars mission goals. Well, first cargo missions in 2022. Is it likely? Hopefully. I think it will be close. Although it is aspirational, SpaceX has already started building the system. The tooling for the main tanks has been ordered. The facility is being built and construction of the first ship will start around the second quarter of next year. The Earth-Mars synchronization happens roughly every 2 years, so every 2 years there is an opportunity to fly to Mars. Obviously, that alignment occurs in 2022, so if that target's missed, 2024 is the next. Next, in 2024, the goal is to fly 4 ships, 2 cargo and 2 crew. The goal of the first mission is to find the best source of water, and the second mission, well, the goal is to build the propellant plant. The plan is with 6 ships there to have plenty of landed mass to construct the propellants depot, which will consist of a large array of solar panels and then everything necessary to mine and refine water and draw the CO2 out of the atmosphere, and then create and store deep cryo CH4 and all that. They'll basically get everything done. Now the base starts with 1 ship, then multiple ships, then we start building out the city and making the city bigger and bigger, and over time terraforming Mars and making it a really nice place to be. SpaceX, well, Elon Musk, has another plan. It involves a BFR for Earth-to-Earth transport. Think of it as traveling at 27,000 kilometers an hour, or roughly 18,000 miles an hour to commute from place to place. During the final descent, where propulsive landing becomes very important, most of what people consider to be a long-distance trips would be completed in less than half an hour. This trip necessitates visiting high altitudes. Here's why. In space, there's no friction. So once you're out of the atmosphere and it is smooth sailing, there's no turbulence. Since SpaceX is building this thing to go to the moon and Mars, then why not go other places on Earth as well? As per the schedule, your arrival time is quite fast. So, who knows? Anyway, I wanted to show you something. If you haven't seen it yet, you have to, but surely you've seen it yet, which means you want to see it again. I'm speaking, of course, about the Falcon Heavy and its, historic launch. Okay? So, let's watch the launch. Let's go to space!
T-15, stand by for terminal count. And 9, 8,
Side booster ignition.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2,
seconds. If you can hear me over the cheering, Falcon Heavy heading to space on our test flight. Building on the history of Saturn V Apollo, returning pad 39A to interplanetary missions. We're getting ready to throttle down for max Q.
Vehicle is supersonic.
You've heard the call out. Vehicle is supersonic.
Inside shutdown. Inside boosters. Vehicle. Center. We south and up. S1 keeps going. Still booster baseball excited.
Successful separation. We're coming up on Miko and shutdown.
Stay set. Separation confirmed. They have recognition. This big burn looks good inside boosters. Spectrum startup.
Coming up on fairing separation.
Center core, side engines.
Respective landing
boosters,
zones.
landing legs have started. Side boosters, landing legs have deployed.